Okay, so we are presenting, we have a two-part session. The first part is using data to develop healthcare training programs with students and employers in mind. And our kind of subtitle for this session is Pipeline into Certification Programs. And I cannot see anyone, but everyone can see screen? My screen?
Yes.
Yes, okay, perfect. All right. So I'll go ahead and get started with introducing the presentation team. So Susan Sheets is the CCR at the Shelbyville Excel Center in Indiana. She's been with Goodwill for 5 years, and Janetta Thompson is also a CCR at University Heights Excel Center, and she has been with Goodwill for 4 years. And I am Jess Jones. I am the Work-Based Learning Manager with Goodwill Talent Source, and I've been with Goodwill for almost 8 years. So we're really excited that you chose our session and hope it is informative for you and helpful. So before we talk about how we build the pipeline for students, we wanted to kind of help you understand our mindset and how we decide what programs to offer. We think about the employer need, we think about job growth and hourly wages, and we want to make sure that students have sustainable wages when they get into the career. So this is a slide of information and data that we collected about medical assisting in Indiana. And that is going to be the program that we focus on for the presentation, and going through kind of all the ins and outs of building the pipeline and then what that program looks like. So every state collects data like this. We get this data from the Department of Workforce Development, and it's hyperlinked on that website's hyperlinked on the PowerPoint. So if you are interested in looking at what that looks like, it's in there. And then if you struggle to find this data in your state, please reach out to us and we can kind of brainstorm with you to how you could find it. But the kind of indicators we're looking for is it a hot job? Is there job growth? Are there openings? What are the types of titles that students are going to be applying for? Can they work not just in hospitals, but call centers and that kind of thing? Like, is there just a lot of diversity of places that they can work? So we're thinking about that. And then the other thing that we do is we don't just look across the state, but we look internally at what our students and participants have done and where they've been able to find employment and what the wages have been. So again, for this, we're really focusing on medical assisting, but we want to show, our other medical programs that that we have and that we track. Certified nursing assistant, pharmacy tech, and medical assisting. We collect how many people have gotten placements, we collect the wage, and then as you see, we look at it from year to year and we want to see wage growth. And we're seeing that here, so that makes us happy and excited to keep on going with this program. So now we're going to get into how to build the pipeline, and I'm going to hand it off to Jeanette.
Good afternoon. My name is Janetta Thompson, and I'm the CCR at UH. So one of the most important things with the medical certifications, especially, but with all certifications, is understanding your role as the CCR. So as the CCR, you should be able to connect with the coaches, the lead coach, the lead teacher, the teachers in the building. The TOR is especially important when it comes to those students that have 504s and IEPs, but learning that it is a building-wide thing in order to get students into not just certifications that they're interested in and that will help them with their future, but also that would be best for them. So we have to stay student-focused. So what I do currently is I work with everybody in the building because everybody has different relationships with students. And I also set up meetings with the students. First, I have them complete a form to tell me what it is they're interested in. Then when we meet, we talk about that. Why are you interested in this? What do you think this is? Having them do their career research. And that doesn't have to start in senior seminar. That can start as early as when they walk in the door to become a student. And that way you can help them kind of see what that certification looks like, what the career field is like, Someone might say, oh, I want to be a nurse, but not really know what type of nurse, what nursing program to go into, or that they even want to take care of people. They may just want to be in the medical field. So, okay, you want to be in the medical field, maybe certified billing and coding would be the best thing for you. So we want to make sure that we all have the same common goal and that it is a building-wide effort and a student focused. Also, you want to make sure that you are putting students in certifications that are ready for certifications. So for instance, we're talking about the medical certifications. You need to find out what those certifications consist of in the classes, build that relationship with your providers, talk to them about your student needs, what it is you expect from them, and what that they are expecting from us as well. You need to be able to build that relationship with your provider so that if you run into any issues, you can talk to them about how do we pivot from here, maybe changing the way the course is set up or changing the requirements for a student to be in that certification. Especially in the medical with the terminology and the math, we know that they should be in at least English 4 and Algebra 2 if they have not completed them. So again, like I said, it's a building-wide effort. You have to stay student focused and understand your role. You may run into some roadblocks. Don't let that stop you. You know what your job is as a CCR, because you want to put students in certifications where they are going to be successful and that they're able to pass, especially those national tests. Does anybody have any questions?
Okay, so I think we'll turn it over to Susan.
Susan, I think you're muted.
Thank you. I apologize. Hi, everyone. My name is Susan Sheets, and I am the CCR at the Excel Center Shelbyville. And it's a pleasure to get to talk with you a little bit about some of the things that Janetta has previously mentioned, just particular points of focus as we try to prepare students for successful transitions into certification classes and successful experiences in those classes with positive outcomes at the end. We look at 3 different types of prerequisites. First are the academic prerequisites, and those are literacy levels in both English and in mathematics. And what we did was just to show you some examples of our prerequisites in our medically related certification classes. We have prerequisites for the CNA program, and then we have a bit more stringent prerequisites for our CCMA program, pharmacy technician program, and then certified billing and coding specialist. Those are things that we want our students to know, certainly as they enroll with us, so that they can be goal setters and put themselves in a positive position to have the opportunity to participate in a certification of their choice. It's also important, though, as Janetta said, to communicate those literacy levels to our instructors so that they know how critically important it is that students remain with them until they can achieve the benchmarks necessary to move forward. There's a reward that's greater than just moving from English 3 to English 4 even. Another prerequisite that we have is a focus on career interests and goals. In our senior seminar classes, obviously, but also long before that, we start gearing ourselves toward achieving the students' educational and career goals, particularly because many of our Excel centers serve students who are ages 16 and 17. They may need to do the completion of a wide variety of inventories to determine their aptitudes and their learning styles, their personality characteristics, and how those things combine to help them to make solid career choices. We also offer formal research of a career interest, and then we offer the opportunity in senior seminar for research of post-secondary education and training that would lead students to a sustainable career, but also to a pathway for continuing to grow in that career. Then finally, one of our big focuses is the focus on professionalism. In many types of situations, we utilize an employability skills rubric, and we asked our students earlier in their journey to evaluate themselves and where they stand in their employment of those skills as they begin their journey with us. Then we evaluate them as we continue to emphasize the skills and ways that they can improve upon those skills and just keep building them. We focus on adaptability, self-awareness, emotional intelligence, definitely being able to empathize with the situations of others as part of emotional intelligence, grit, integrity, attendance, including punctuality and active participation in a class or in a work experience, leadership, and goal striving. And then on our next slide, we just wanted to show you the rubric that we use so that the students can do some self-evaluation. And then we use the very same rubric in evaluating them toward the end of their senior seminar experience. So it's really good to see how the students evaluate themselves and then the growth that we see in them as they continue their journeys.
Okay. So beyond the work in the classroom, one of the things that we're always thinking about are barriers to employment outside of the classroom. So two of those things pop up often: criminal background and also legal documentation to work. So we want to set students up for success in gaining employment after the course. And these two categories can present the barriers. So for the criminal backgrounds, communication is key. Starting the conversations early with students if they disclose that they have charges or convictions on their background. There's many ways around things on backgrounds. We have expungement programs for students. We know from employers that a lot of the time, if something's 5 years old, that is old to an employer. And if it's not a charge that's a total deal breaker, there's lots of ways that a student can communicate in an interview or through other processes to the employer that there have not been repeated offenses, and therefore there of course is a second chance. The other part of this is that background checks don't come up just with employment, but sometimes with the certification program itself. So healthcare certifications and careers require background checks at different entry points. So for like a certified nursing assistant in the state of Indiana, they have to have a background check before entering into the class. So that could come into play. For a pharmacy technician, they need to have a background check when they get a license through the state of Indiana. So even they've completed the class, they've taken the national exam, they've graduated, but they still need to get a background check in order to get a license that allows them to practice in Indiana. And then for medical assisting, it really comes at the point of employment. And we know with all, nursing assistants and pharm techs, they're all going to get background checks with employers as well. But just being aware for the student when that happens, because if a student's very excited about being a certified nursing assistant and the program's ready to go, but then they have to have that background check right before the class and something happens with that, that can be very demoralizing. So just a lot of communication around that to really help prepare students. And then also the legal authorization to work I-9 documentation. So our employer partners require authorization to work for externships and on-site teaching days, simply because their goal is immediate hiring, so that they want to make sure somebody has that documentation before they would come for an externship. And our students are at varying stages in the citizenship process, and we need to have also open, if they're comfortable with it, open communication about that, so we can help prepare them on these career paths. Almost all of our healthcare certifications require some kind of government issued ID to test. So that also comes into play with just having that documentation of an issued ID. And for our mindset is it's never a no. There's never an end stop. No, you can't do this because of the documentation. It's always a not yet. We always want to work and follow along with students even after they graduate, because we have programs like Goodwill Guides. We have other supportive programs with Goodwill after they graduate, where if they get the documentation, are ready to have the externship, are ready for employment, we want to be there to support and help them. For an example of this, I was working with a Pharm Tech student who had, she was in the process of getting the Social Security card and the work authorization. She was in her Pharm Tech class. She had taken the exam and passed it, is going to be a graduate, and just didn't have that documentation yet. We did everything we possibly could to prepare for that licensing piece, which is when she would need that documentation. And just to prepare and be ready, because we knew it was going to happen. It could be 6 months, could be 3 months, but we knew it was going to happen. And then she just recently got it. So we were then able to, with all that prep work, paid off, and it's a more quick entrance into a career because we knew it was going to happen and we wanted to follow along with her to help her get there. And then the other wonderful thing that we have is we get as much feedback from employers as possible about what a job ready candidate looks like to them. And then in order to communicate that back to the students, and particularly for the medical assisting program, we work with so many employers in the externship space and employment. We know the themes of feedback that they bring back to us. So these themes are here: attendance, of course. Can you show up on time? Can you stick to a schedule? Initiative, students who aren't afraid to ask questions when they don't know something. Do they know what to do when there's downtime or when their mentor has stepped away? Do they act professionally, even when dealing with very challenging providers, nurses, staff, patients? Can they act professionally? And then flexibility. Can students cope when their mentor doesn't have the ability to always explain what's happening every hour of the day they're there? Or if there are hours that are just completely unplanned on the site, do they know how to jump in and make the best out of that? And then I wanted to give from, so to speak, the employer's mouth of feedback that we get. So for the externship process, I work really closely with clinic managers to place students, but then also once the student is on the site. So there would be periodic check-ins where I would get emails and just kind of ask, how is the student doing? And I would receive feedback. So I highlighted some of the themes that pop up. And the top two are the growth area feedback pieces. So not self-motivated, unsure what to do nor ask, not self-motivated, on the cell phone, talkative. So you see the theme there, needing students and candidates to be as motivated as possible to just jump in, even maybe if they're a little bit afraid, kind of fake it till you make it. We try to teach them that. And then the last two also shows that motivation piece. So the last two pieces of feedback are positive. This is for an extern. She was awesome, motivated. She asked when she was unsure, very considerate, punctual, professional, mature for her age, detail-oriented. And when she needs help, she asks. So what's nice about this feedback too, it's very apparent that employers are wanting students that learn. They are not necessarily wanting them to come in knowing 100% of the task. They know that they're not. And so that soft skill piece of a student being confident enough and professional enough to ask for help in a way that's professional, and shows that they're motivated and shows that they want to learn is really important to the employers that we talk to. The other piece that we try to do as much as possible is if there are not externships with a program, to bring employers in some capacity. So we will have mock interview events every single term. Students through their senior seminar class will have mock interviews, but we like to bring employers in, at least one employer per term for the school or per school every single term, so that they can actually talk and be interviewed by an employer, not just us, Goodwill staff. We also organize interview events that are for jobs. So that's a picture of that happening at Tom Wood Ford in Indiana, in Marion County. And then we also have presenters or employers that come in and give presentations about the opportunities that they have. We've done a lot of Zoom presentations, as you can imagine. And those have been pretty awesome because an employer can just drop in for 20, 30 minutes into a class and talk about the opportunities that they have, and it really makes an impact on students. The other piece of this is we organize events where we had a virtual workforce Wednesday where we brought providers and also employers together to talk to students about the career path and about what the class would look like and about what employment would look like, so that students really get feedback from both the instructor and also the employer. And then I wanted to show, we have tools. We use these in the classroom, kind of like what Susan showed, the rubric that's used in senior seminar, but also on the externship, especially for medical assisting, there are tools where they'll be evaluated. And I snipped this part out because this shows that what is being evaluated more than anything is communication, and not necessarily always the hard skills. And being able to help students understand how they can communicate on the work site is hard sometimes if they come in needing a lot of help with that. It's a good challenge for us, but it's hard sometimes if you are an instructor and you're used to being in the classroom to kind of know like what's the wording employers are looking for, how would a student present themselves professionally when they're asking for help, like what does that look like? So using these rubrics that employers have where they evaluate externs has been very helpful for us to help students know that. And then the other piece of this is knowing it's actually exactly what Susan had said too, with the helping the student to understand kind of the attitude fit for medical assisting is the empathy and the care that you will exhibit in your communication to patients. And employers, especially medical assistants, are always looking for that. They, in fact, can train on the hard skills. They often cannot train on that, and they know that, and they say that to us. So sometimes they're looking for students with lots of customer service experience and not so much any hard skill medical experience. And that, again, kind of comes into play when we look at these tools that they use to evaluate with communication. Okay. I have to admit that when I shared my screen, I don't know if I clicked the little things that make sure that you can hear me or hear her, and we're going to show a video of the student. So I kind of want to do that before I would press play. So I'll introduce the student first. This is Erica Stevens. She is a Shelbyville grad, so she was one of Susan's students, and she's just a phenomenal student. Went into the medical assisting program at Major Hospital, Major Health Partners. We'll talk about that program in our next session. But she got her certification, instantly got employment there, and now is a preceptor there. So that means she's a mentor for our students and helps to teach them. So it's a pretty awesome story. So I'm going to stop share for a second, share again, so just to make sure everybody can hear. Yep. Okay, so here we go with Erica. And let me also make sure my volume's up. Challenge a little bit with this.
Meet Erica Stevens, a 2019 graduate of the Excel Center Shelbyville with the CCMA certification and currently a clinical medical assistant at MHP Hospital. Erica, how valuable was the training you received in this course?
starting from the Excel Center to help us a lot with all the material stuff before we start the classes. Kim Gillis, which is our instructor, always help us with anything and everything, all questions. I even remember call her anytime and telling her several questions when I was, just starting myself, calling her on my first time when I did my shot by myself, calling her when I drew, blood and everything. So I feel like the support from the Excel Center in MHP is really good.
Did this class provide you with everything you needed to work in the medical field?
Yeah, it's everything pretty much, because they tell you everything that I do every day is the same, everything. I mean, obviously you learn more stuff now because it depends in the area that you are, but everything that when you come from the class, everything is there.
What is the best part of your job?
One of the best part being on the translating is when I have to help the patients when they're gonna have a C-section or they're gonna have the delivery, so I can be there for them to explain everything and anything what the doctors and the nurses doing downstairs. So that's one of the best part for me.
Did the Excel Center and the CCMA program help you find employment?
Yes, I don't even finish my 160 hours and I already get hired. And I never gonna forget that I called Kim and I said that I wanna work in OBGYN and the position was open. So Kim called Rebecca and Rebecca said, go ahead and apply for it. And the next day I have the job.
How has the CCMA program changed your life?
Oh, it changed completely. I feel like now I feel more like my kids gonna see me as a role model, as you just follow what you want to do, spending time with my kids, just to having a job, that you come to work and you're happy with it, and when you come home, you're happy with it too. So I feel like that changed completely.
Has completing the CCMA program changed your long-range plans?
Yes, they did. At first, I was always, saying like a CCMA, I want to be and doing that, but now I'm looking to be our OB nurse. Just working in OBGYN, I really do like that, so I want to continue to college and be OB nurse.
What advice do you offer to students considering the CCMA program?
Well, one of the things that I think being a medical field is that something you want to do it. Because if something you want to do it, you're going to like anything and everything. And starting for doing like a blood pressures, giving some shot, or just taking care of a patient, I feel like you have to like that. If you like that, you will be happy in anywhere in the medical field.
Okay. So that kind of concludes the slides and the material we wanted to present. I know there's questions in the chat, so I want to get to those. Excuse me, because I'm really behind. All I've been doing is look in the chat. So
Jess, I can help you with that first one that Rachel kind of put in there, and Susan spoke to it. But really, I think, Rachel, wasn't your question wanting to understand the academic requirements? How do we kind of land at those? And how do you get buy-in in the building from teachers and such to understand them? Is that correct? Awesome. And if there's any flexibility on them ever?
okay, those are good. So Susan, do you want to say more to that about the academic requirements, or Janetta too? And I know Janetta can speak to buy-in in the building. I feel like that's a question for Janetta.
I will defer to Janetta for now, and maybe I can cover the second part of the question. But I know, Jess, you and Janetta worked specifically on those academic prerequisites together. So I'll let Janetta jump in first.
Thank you, Susan. So we landed on the prereqs from trial and error. We used to just put students in certifications because they said that's what they wanted. But as we looked further into the certification and into the tests that they were required to take, we saw that they would need a certain level of English in order to understand the medical terminology, and a certain level of mathematics, especially in pharmacy tech, in order to break down dosages and things. And in talking with the providers, seeing what they thought would be the best way to handle that. to get the buy-in throughout the building, it's just, like I said, working with each other and talking to each other. Because when you all have the same common goal in mind, it's a little easier to get the buy-in, and they want to see the students succeed. So they're willing to do what they need to help them get to that point.
I want to add to that too, like it's piggybacking on what Janetta said, but I notice when students don't pass an exam and there's a lot of stress and heartache and the staff sees that, they know, okay, these are the prereqs. We've got to get them there before they get put in the class. Just the like that kind of anxiety that's created by not passing and maybe not have being as prepared as possible to go into that class. I think that helps to build unity in the building for everybody to be on the same page for that.
And also I want to add, when the students understand what it's going to take for them to get in the certification they want, they tend to work harder to make sure they have acquired those skills.
Shelley made a good point too. The provider input is critical. Sometimes we rely on our providers to make the test prep if it doesn't exist already through the company that we're, the sponsoring organization they're taking the test through. So those providers know the test in and out, so they can tell us like literally this is actually what's going to be on the exam, the level of math, level of English, and that's so helpful. Have you considered GPA in math and sciences in order to be admitted to those CERT programs? I really think we're looking at the classes that they've taken. That's how we're imagining this, and not so much the GPA, because we know the material that's covered in the English class, and we know the material that's covered in the math class, and we know they're going to hit what they need to be prepared versus the GPA. That's my answer, but feel others, they want to chime in on that. Okay.
I'm trying to think if we've ever, I agree with that, Jess. The only other thing that I'm kind of thinking through in this part of the conversation is really how we have worked really closely with employers and training providers on the front end to identify the fit and the readiness. Like earlier in the presentation, you made a point about we're not trying to say a no to anyone. Most often if it's not ready yet, but we have certainly in our medical programs, we have really worked with employers and providers in some cases and developed a screening process, selection process to really measure that readiness. Again, we want to set students up for success. And if they're not quite ready, then we want to know why they're not ready, identify those gaps so we can work on that with them and get them to that readiness. But that work with the training provider has been a really important piece of kind of helping us identify who is ready.
I think the best way to give the provider an opportunity to measure the readiness of the student is to give the provider as much direct exposure to the student as possible. So we try to do orientation programs where they can get to know the students in a group. And then we try to do on-site visits and interviews and essay writing so that, again, they're getting various pictures of the student and measuring not only their academic preparedness, but also their employability skills. And that helps to establish the fit. Just that exposure in the weeks before the program starts seems to make a big difference in establishing the best fits.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Susan. And I think about that because then the next session, we'll talk about the two different perspectives of the employer and the level of involvement, and having the employer interview get involved kind of takes the weight off of our back to have that, that mindset. Like we don't have the mindset of the person who's ultimately going to give them the job. So it's wonderful to get that on the front end for them to tell us, yes, the student has great soft skills, or, they did well in a quick interview. they handled themselves well at the orientation. Like having that feedback from employers is so critical for that selection too. Okay. Any other questions? And if we're missing any.
Jess, if I might, I was just going to throw out there from our colleagues from a whole bunch of different places, would love to hear anything you all are doing in your respective areas to contribute to the conversation as well. We'd love to hear anything you'd like to share about what you've learned in the certification space.
And we would be interested, Nate's gonna go, maybe.
I was going to say that, well, first of all, thank you all for the presentation and all the information you all provided thus far. And I really enjoyed that because we're trying to think about additional certifications and how to add those into what we currently have into the suite of what during COVID anyway, what we have. We had to stop one certification process because you couldn't do it face-to-face and in person. So just trying to figure out how to navigate that. But we've done well with what we had in hospitality and transition it to a different space to make it business focused. It's just, that's why I was asking the questions about the data earlier, trying to figure out employer needs and getting them on site that makes sense to tie it to the student so that they could actually get a good feel of who and what they're getting as a product in the end too. So I think that's going to be critical. So I really appreciate that.
I like the way that you put that with the product for this, what the student's going to get, because it's such a partnership of we're trying to get the employer in and meet their needs, but ultimately we're meeting the student needs. That's really what our whole goal is. So for them to understand the end product is a job, it's this possible wage, it's going to look like this, builds that motivation, we think, for students we found. So I like the way that you put that wording there. Thanks for that. Looks like Elizabeth said, would love to hear more about certifications that can go into further education, like the graduate interview mentioned. Can we offer dual credits that tie to that? This might be, I bet Shelley or Chris could say specifically on this, but I do know, like through Vincennes University is one of our providers for medical assisting, and there have been discussions, if not in the work, the ways that credits can transfer once they've earned the certification. But I think I'm totally wrong on this, aren't I, Shelley? Like it's not a one-to-one. They still have something to get the credits.
Yes, I appreciate that question. And in full transparency, that's a space that we're always looking for a new opportunity to continue and grow in. I'm guessing, I know here in Indiana, central Indiana, and I'm guessing in a lot of places where you all are, there's an increasing focus on competency-based learning and how you can look at the competencies and how those can translate into academic credit and continued learning and continued credentials and such. So yes, we are interested and looking at how we can continue to help the certifications that we do, look at them as a gateway for our students and really an entrance into a full career path and not just a terminal credential and I'm stopping here, right? We want them to keep moving and be lifelong learners. So the healthcare field, we identify those in-demand sectors like the healthcare field, which as we know, there's all kinds of pathways. So that's one of the big reasons why we put a lot of focus in this space, because we know there's a lot of different ways that our students can go. So I'd say we're certainly not where we want to be, but we're headed in the right direction, and really being mindful of connecting students to those opportunities to help them keep moving.
Ellie, I thought I might piggyback on that and talk about how what we've discovered is that some post-secondary institutions are more willing to be creative and flexible with looking at the curriculum or the standards that are validated by the national exams and to award some sort of transfer credit. Whereas some of our largest, I would say, most well-known post-secondary institutions are not always the ones that are at the table able to be flexible in the way that we would like them to be. And so, don't assume that just that the answer you might get from one institution is going to be the answer you get from another institution. So seek out multiple partnerships with post-secondary institutions, show them what your students are earning. You may have to familiarize them with the competencies that these national exams are validating. But we are having incremental success with some universities that were not the first that we approached with this. And ask for certification crosswalks. That is a fairly common tool that you will see a post-secondary institution use. So they will assign a certain amount of credits for a nationally recognized certification that someone earns, but we do see a lot of instances where that credit is only for an elective. It doesn't necessarily get them any ground in a degree program, but it still can incentivize a student to enroll and continue into college.
Okay, any other questions?
Nate, I put it in the chat. I'm just curious what hospitality certifications you all do.
So currently we have one, well, two actually. It was it was a suite of four, where it was hospitality and tourism, and we swapped that out for what is Bring Your A Game Everywhere, to make it more applicable to all different fields of where someone can be employed. The other one was tourism. The other one that we use now is Making Connections, which deals with customer service. It's customer service based, which can be transferred to any field as well. And we teach it from that perspective, where it can be transferable skills to any industry in which these students go into. And the other one was totally separate from hospitality, which was a security professional, or SPO, where they're unarmed security guards. Other than that, they had handcuffing, batoning, and it's pepper spray. Quite sure there's a more technical term for it, but pepper spray.
Thanks.
Oh, no problem. No problem at all.
Is the Bring Your A Game the Josh Davies?
Yes, it is actually. And we teach that. It's in 2.5 weeks, where they learn the 7. I'm sorry for everyone who doesn't know. Bring Your A Game Everywhere is a combination of 7 A's, where it's still service based in that you can apply these things everywhere, and you learn through accountability, attendance, appearance, and you're able to have these terms and definitions with all these videos, it's matching, and it's online, and it's very interactive. So students really like it, and they get their certificate right then and there once they're done. So it's an instant gratification thing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. All right, well, we don't want to cut anybody off or any discussion. So if there's anything else anybody wants to say, please do.
Jess, there was a question from Rachel Dye. Her audio wasn't working, but she was wondering how you first go about approaching a provider.
That is in the next session, the first thing that we're going to talk about. So I hope that everyone, I think you were forced to sign up for 2, weren't you? Like everybody. Okay, so everybody in this one will be, so we will answer that at the top of this next one. Yeah. Okay. All right, well, a little bit more time then to stretch legs and walk and eat and whatever you need to do, and we'll